Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to this morning's edition of Contractors Conversation. I am your host, Luciana Turner, and we're having part two of our conversation on caretakers fatigue. And joining us this morning for part two of the conversation, we brought back our guest, Whitney King. And hello,
Hi, good morning.
how are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me back. I have been looking forward to continuing this conversation all week.
And this is such an important conversation. I was reading a comment someone left on my LinkedIn profile, and they were talking about, they actually asked me the question, how was I managing caretaker fatigue? And that is an important question. But before we get there, we want to back up a little bit. Last week, we discussed caretaker fatigue concerning employees, how they're balancing work and family obligations. We listed out some resources, and we just want to do a minor recap. So, if you could just recap the conversation for us and just list a few things they can do to avoid it and some resources they can do to reach out to obtain some help. Just to do a brief recap of what we discussed last week.
Absolutely. So, last week we had the opportunity to talk about the biggest challenges faced by caregivers who are also professionals. And one of those challenges is time management. So, often caregivers feel like there aren't enough hours in the day to meet both professional and caregiver responsibilities. And that can lead to emotional exhaustion and also a feeling of guilt. Those are both significant feelings that caregivers often encounter. A lot of caregivers struggle with the pressure to excel in their careers while also being fully present to be there for their loved ones. And that leads to burnout. So, some of those tools we talked about was just ensuring that you're utilizing things such as scheduling apps, your calendar, to prioritize what events and activities you have going on for yourself and your family and your loved one that is being cared for if they're not in your immediate home. You want to identify those critical tasks for work and caregiving and make sure you include some time for self care. Developing a routine helps. That lets everybody know what's kind of predictable and when there's something required that needs to be taken care of. And you want to be adaptable and adjust as needed whenever those unexpected events do occur. When it comes to being at work, delegate tasks to your colleagues or employees when responsible. I'm sorry, when possible. And at home, you want to share some of those responsibilities with other family members or hire professional caregivers if that's possible. So, we also touched on the possibility of utilizing your loved one's insurance. Some states have various waivers that will cover caregivers, the cost of caregivers to come into the home and support you. I know in Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, those are just some states that I've had the opportunity to support families in. Those states have waivers and various Medicaid and Medicare parts that does cover for caregivers to come into the home.
Thank you for giving us that brief overview of the conversation because I feel that oftentimes when we get swept into the moment, we don't utilize our resources and we make, I
Mhm.
call them crisis decisions,
Yeah,
and we don't intend to, but we often make these crisis decisions from a place of I'm alone and I have to do it all and there's no help anywhere. And
mhm.
that's very rarely true, if ever
Yeah.
true. So I just wanted to recap that conversation. So this week, we're talking about caretaker fatigue from the position of decision makers, business founders, and somebody is saying, well, that's the same thing. And it's not quite the same thing because I'm going to use myself as an example. I had a business that I started. I'm taking care of myself. I have children. I have an aging mother who's was diagnosed with dementia, and that's just a lot of juggle. I just hired somebody, so I'm managing someone. I'm in the need of hiring some more people. It's just a lot to juggle, and it's easy to become overwhelmed in that process. So I wanted to, and that's actually where this conversation was born from, because oftentimes we as decision makers, we as founders, think that we're not in the same boat as a lot of our employees, and we are. So I wanted to have this conversation separate from the employee, because there are some distinctions and there are some differences, even though we are in the same boat, essentially. So
Exactly.
I just wanted your thought. Let's have a conversation around business founders and caretaker fatigue.
Well, there's definitely a huge impact on the mental health and finances and even the business performance when it comes to looking at caregiver fatigue from the business owner point of view. While the person who made that comment was correct in that everyone is kind of experiencing that same exhaustion from being a caregiver, like you stated, there are some key distinctions. And it's one of those big ones is that as a business owner, you also have to maintain the entire business because your decision making will drive whether your employees remain employed and have access to their benefits and things of that magnitude. So that's another layer of stress. But I also, because I don't believe in creating this divide when it comes to this space, I feel like we're all in this together. We only say that that divide exists because that's just another task that has to be done. So if we look at it from an employee standpoint, we look at those tasks. Let's just say as a business owner, that's another task on our to-do list to ensure that all of these things remain in place. So we have compliances, we have regulations, we have all of those things that have to be considered when it comes to our day-to-day decision making. Um, the caregivers, the number of caregivers is growing globally. Um, the role of caregivers in the workplace, especially among business owners, has gained a lot of attention in the recent years. And I want to go over some statistics that I came across about the prevalence of caregivers among business owners. So, according to AARP, approximately 1 in 6 workers in the US are caregivers. So, this means around 20% of the workforce provides care for a family member or a friend. And a survey conducted by the U.S. Small Business Administration (SBA) and SCORE in 2022 revealed that 30% of small business owners also identify as caregivers. So that means they're managing both their caregiver responsibilities and the responsibilities of running a business. Now, when it comes to female entrepreneurs, we know that number has grown rapidly over the years, and that's a wonderful thing. Women make up a significant portion of both caregivers and business owners. So, the National Alliance for Caregiving found that 61% of caregivers are women. Among women business owners, a higher percentage report balancing caregiver roles, with an estimate of 40% of female entrepreneurs also serving as family caregivers. So many caregiver business owners indicate that caregiver responsibilities influence their business decisions. And according to a MetLife caregiving study, 25% of caregiver business owners reported having to modify their business operations, such as reducing hours or scaling back to accommodate caregiving duties. Um, uh, and
I just
I,
want
I
I want to
know
stop
that's
there.
true as
I want to
well.
stop right there real quick. Can you say that again?
Which part about having to reduce hours or
Modify your
scaling back?
business. Modify your business.
Yeah. So a lot of caregiver business owners, um, indicate that their caregiving responsibilities do influence their business decisions. I personally know that to be true. I myself have scaled back my own business model so that it has become way more flexible for me. So I released an entire team. I had an entire team of other business consultants and contractors, but I began going back and forth to Pennsylvania to provide support to my grandmother. I serve as her power of attorney, and then I also have a son with autism. So while his support needs aren't very high, they still exist. And therefore, on top of being a mother, I needed to make sure that the decision making that I was making and that needed to take place did not impact the other people, because at the end of the day, these people still had lives of their own, and my decision making would influence what they needed to take care of and things of that nature. So to remove that, I helped all of them get into other positions, and then I just scaled it all the way back. So now I'm a solopreneur. It's only me, so that I'm the only one that has to be considered when any of these decisions need to be made at this time. So, approximately 57% of caregivers who are business owners run home based businesses. That talks to what I just said. And this allows for greater flexibility to balance caregiving and professional responsibilities. So, those statistics really do highlight how caregiving intersects with entrepreneurship and influences how business owners manage their time and resources.
That's amazing. Um, a lot of people think, well, if you hire more people, you would have more time, and that isn't necessarily true.
No, it's not. It takes up more time, in my
Es-
opinion, in my experience.
Especially when you consider payroll, because there's that middle that people don't
Mhm.
consider when you're growing and scaling. There's
Yeah.
that middle that requires you to be all in, and you can't skip them. I don't care what you do, you can't skip that part of the growth process that requires you to be all in. And I don't
Yeah.
care how many consultants you hire. I don't care how many people that you hire, they don't replace you in your business.
Absolutely.
So it takes so if it's always this tug of war of how and and then how do I meet this need, and then how do I miss, because if you miss a business need, that's people that don't get paid.
Yep.
And then on top of that, if you don't pay people, they don't feel obligated to work, and they shouldn't. But then you have clients that are upset, and then you have the government that comes in and say you didn't pay people. Then you have clients who come in, potentially. It's just a snowball effect. But then you have these people that are depending on you that could, and then you have that issue there of caretaker neglect. That's
Mhm.
still the government coming after you. So it's just this
Yeah.
ping pong
Absolutely.
effect.
And you really touched on something, because balancing, there's something that is important about balancing caregiver expenses with your business expenses. And that can be challenging for a lot of business owners, especially when the personal and professional responsibilities start to overlap.
And you have to be careful of that, because you can't say, well, this is my company, I'll just take it out of the company funds.
And we see
Oh,
it every
no,
day.
no, no.
We see it every day.
You will get
Yeah.
in trouble, and you don't want the starring role in Orange is the New Black, because that's the major non-compliance. No, it may be a
Yes.
nice Netflix show, but you don't want to roll in that in real life.
Absolutely.
And non-compliance, I keep telling people, I'm starting a series on non-compliance in February. Non-compliances will shut down your business quicker than anything else.
Yeah.
So then you don't want that added burden onto everything else you're juggling. So as a compliance person, I'm gonna tell you, don't bend the rules, as people like to say. Don't break the rules, because rules can't be bent. You're either doing it or you're breaking them. Period. There's no bending. So
Yeah.
don't break the rules trying to fix another problem. You can't do
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely. So I like to advise and encourage people to create separate budgets. If you're in this business owner and caregiver space, you want to make sure you have a personal versus a business budget. And what that looks like is establishing clear and separate budgets for the caregiver and the business expenses to prevent overlapping confusion. So that'll make it easier to track and manage costs related to each area. So some of those caregiver expenses might include medical bills, caregiver supplies, home modifications. Some people need to add things such as ramps, widen their doorways, rise commodes, change out the shower, things of that nature. And then professional caregiving services. Some people may not have tapped into any insurance waivers and things of that nature. So they're paying for caregiving and rested out of pocket. So you want to make sure that's included in your caregiver expenses. And then your business expenses are things such as like your rent, your utilities, your salaries, like we talked about, supplies, and your business insurance.
And I want to talk to people about, you have a business, talk to your insurance agent about any changes you can make in your business insurance, because a lot of times we're not maximizing our business insurance and
Mhm.
carrying things on our personal side, that if we upped our business insurance, we could be making adjustment there. I'm not saying charge personal expenses to business. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're offering insurance to your staff, you're part of the staff as the business owner. So why are you not on your business insurance policy? And why are you not taking advantage of those benefits as well? And it boggles me sometimes that people forget, you founded the business, you are a staff member, you should be on that policy, and you should
Yeah.
be maxing out those benefits as well.
Well, that's also my next point is make sure you're taking advantage of any tax deductions. So, caregiver related deductions include like some caregiving expenses, medical costs, home modifications, and some of those things often qualify for tax reduction deductions. So, you want to make sure you research potential tax breaks for dependents because the person you're caring for could potentially be a dependent when you go to file your taxes, or consult with a tax advisor to explore options. I have a wonderful CPA that I often refer people to that can really help you track down what can potentially serve as a deduction for you. And then you want to maximize your business expense deductions for things like those office supplies, travel, marketing, which can help reduce your taxable income and free up some funds for caregiving.
I tell people all the time, when you enter new seasons, there, as much as you may have loved that person who did your taxes when you were 18, that may not be the right person for you at this season. So you need to change to a tax professional who also offer tax advisory services.
Yes,
And just because they do taxes does not mean they are tax advisors.
absolutely.
So you have to turn around and look at your circle of advisors. Do you have the right advisors on your team? And where you
Hmm.
have gaps, fill them. A
Yeah,
health advisor to help you and the person that you're caring for. Somebody to help you
yeah,
balance stress in your personal life. And I'm gonna go here. Those people can also help your team, because you don't know what your team is dealing with until you talk to them or bring somebody in to talk with them. So that's what they say, two birds with the same stone.
well, that's getting into kind of making sure if you're able to offer some of those employee assistance programs, so that your employees know that they exist and they can tap into them. And then you, as the owner, should be able to utilize some of those EAP benefits as well. But to tie up what we were talking about regarding the financial piece, you want to make sure you're seeking professional advice, professional financial advice. So consider consulting a financial planner who can help develop a personalized being the key word,
Mhm.
plan that can help you balance caregiving expenses and those business investments. And then again, you said it perfectly. You want to work with a tax advisor just to ensure that you're taking full advantage of any deductions and credits that can apply to both your caregiving and your business expenses. I can agree that the same tax professional I was using in my early 20s is not the same one I need now. Especially even as business changes, as you gain or lose employees, you might not need the same level of support. So you want to make sure that you're knowledgeable of this information so that you can make those informed decisions to know who should be on your core team for decision making. Intelligent, excuse me, let me not say intelligent, let me say successful
No,
business owners
yeah.
are those who have a knowledgeable team around them. and
We're
and that
always
helps them
supposed
make
to
those
seek wise
decisions.
counsel.
Yeah, yes, the word says seek wise counsel.
And sometimes we seek counsel, but that wise part, Oh, it gets thrown out. No, wise counsel.
Yes, yes, indeed. Absolutely.
And if you don't
Absolutely.
know where to look, um, there are plenty of resources. I have a list of power partners, and I am glad. I tell people all the time, I have a list of people. There are things I know how to do, and there are things I don't do.
Hmm.
And I don't do them because whereas I can do them, they're not my wheelhouse.
Yeah,
And can do and should do are two different things.
right.
So for that reason, I have a list of power partners. I have a list of people that I refer to. I have an assurance person. He's awesome. You need somebody that can talk to insurance and tax and insurance advisory services. Here you go. Go talk to him. And
Yeah,
that's what and if you don't know somebody, that's why you have people in your circle that can help you with those things. That's why you have mentors, because I have a mentor who's great. And in his circle, in that mentorship, there are people that are great advisors that he advised to, refer people out to that's within that circle. So doing business alone is not the way to go and can compound the loneliness when you get into seasons like this.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that talks to just making sure you're leveraging support services. So, you want to outsource any specific tasks that you can to freelancers or hire temporary staff to manage peak periods. You want to
Mm.
know your flow so that you know when your busy season is in your business and know when you need to bring in additional help. And this helps reduce the burden on you as both a caregiver and a business owner. That's self care. Everybody thinks self care is those fancy bath bombs and spa days and things like that, but it's often just making those decisions to free up your mind so that you're able to think clearly and keep the train running. As the business owners, we're often, the go tos for our
Yes.
family. We're the engine that's driving the entire train. So if the tracks are blocked, our mind, we can't keep moving forward. So that's self care. It's just setting those priorities to know what's important and what can take a back seat for the moment so that you can continue moving forward.
I always say a stressed mind can't create.
Yeah,
So if you make yourself the bottleneck, and and oftentimes we do that because we're overwhelmed, and we getting overwhelmed keep piling on. And there comes a point where you have to say, look, I need to delegate.
yeah,
And when someone offers to help, one, ensure that this person is capable, but be willing to say thank you and yes.
right.
You said that so eloquently in the beginning of the session and last week. It's okay to accept help and
Yeah,
and not feel guilty for not being able to do it all.
yeah. I think people should look into respite care services, adult daycare services, sharing caregiving duties with other family members. And that really just helps lighten your caregiving load.
Yeah, this is a conversation we're going to revisit throughout the year because it's so important, especially with the new generation and then an aging generation. And those numbers actually surprised me because I knew
Yes.
it was a problem, but I didn't think it was that big of a problem.
Yeah. Well, if we think about the time frame of a lot of our population is aging. They talk about the boomers and this and that. A lot of our population is aging. We have people who are falling ill to various diagnoses that are growing in prevalence. So that on top of just aging, because at one point I will say when we thought of caregiving at one point, we really only considered the aging population. But now we have to take into consideration loved ones and friends that have mental health diagnoses that need another layer of support. We have to take into consideration loved ones and friends that have some sort of physical or developmental or intellectual disability that need another layer of support. So all of these things fall under the umbrella of who needs a caregiver. It's not just our aging loved ones and friends anymore. It's a lot of people. So those numbers are going to continue to rapidly grow, especially as we remove a lot of stigmas when it comes to mental health and various disabilities, to accept that people do need help. We're going to continue to see those numbers grow as people become educated about what those diagnoses mean and what it means to receive help.
That's true. And now that I think about it, you do have the baby boomers and then you have the Gen Xers.
Hmm.
And so that's two distinct populations that's going to fall on the millennials because a lot of people who are blessed to have grandparents and great grandparents,
Yeah,
it's like, how do you juggle all of this? And
yeah.
having these conversations early, because some people aren't even planning for this. So
No,
you need to start planning for it now. And
and that's
a lot
and
of
that's
people,
where
yeah,
that yeah, well, I was gonna say that's where that financial planning comes in. If you get with a financial planner, you can identify certain, let's say, insurance policy, life insurance. A lot of people think life insurance is just for the end of life. Life insurance, there are many policies out there that can aid in the event that you need to receive caregiver services. It can help you during your living part of your life. So that's what we mean by getting with the financial planner. It's not always about stocks, investing, and things of that nature. It's really planning for your financial future. And, I'm sure you have people you can recommend. I have someone that I work with and recommend people to often that can really just help you sit down and look at the plans for you and your children. Let's face it, at any moment, any of us can become, disabled.
that's true.
And are you ready for that? Are you ready if your spouse becomes disabled? Are you ready if your child becomes disabled? You know, that's just the reality. And a lot of us don't like to have those conversations, which is why no planning is taking place.
Yeah, it's time to start having these tough
Yeah,
conversations within our families and within our businesses. And no matter what size business, we need to start having these conversations.
yeah.
So I
And don't
want
look
to
at it
thank
as tough. I would encourage families and people, out there listening, don't see it as something tough. It's a responsibility. A
yeah,
responsible adult is an adult that plans.
yeah,
That's just what it is. It's just a part of your responsibilities as an adult in your life, especially if you're that engine that we talked about that's leading your family. These are just conversations that just need to take place. If something happened to one of the adults in the home, what happens to everybody else? And we avoid it because it is responsibility. We don't want to be the adults anymore. I just told a girlfriend, I don't want to be an adult anymore.
I want to stop adulting
Yeah.
for like a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to go home and wash dishes and go clean my room. I saw something online yesterday that said, growing up, we fussed about cleaning one room. Now we have to clean a whole house with kids that are. I was like, man, I would go back to cleaning that one room and dishes with no lip. Just,
There
yes,
you go.
mom.
When your biggest problem was homework,
Yes, take it back.
all the way back.
But we know better and we plan, and that's what it's about with seeking wise counsel, listening to, conversations such as these, because some people don't know to do these things and because they weren't taught. And so I'm very, adamant about spreading this information and just advocating for people to just be responsible adults.
And that is the best way to end this conversation. And thank you for joining us for both of these enlightening and insightful conversations. And as I said, we're going to continue to have this conversation. So
Oh, thank
we're
you for
going to see you
having me.
back.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I want to thank everybody who joined us today for joining in Contractors Conversation, because this is an important conversation for us to have around caretakers fatigue. And I don't even like calling it caretakers fatigue because there's a better word for it. I'm going to come up with it to look for it. But we just need to have these conversations balancing life. I know people they're saying that there's no such thing as balance, but there is. We just need to find it. And then once we find it, implement it. That's the key point. We talked about a lot of things over the last two sessions, but once you hear it, implement it. look at what you have going on, find the loopholes, and then implement the strategies that work in your life to find that balance so that you can remove the stress in your life, if you're a business owner, in your employee's life. Because in 2025, it's just time out for acting like we don't know what we know. And with that, join me next time for Contractors Conversation. I'm Luciana Turner, your host. I hope you found some value. We'll post this conversation on our podcast, and I will share Ms. King's information with you on my website so that you can reach out to her. Have an amazing weekend and find rest. Have a good one.